Hi guys, welcome back to Just Talking, where I talk at you and you sometimes listen. So today we're doing a bit of a brief about what might be happening at Blackpool Pleasure Beach's Journey to Hell Freak Nights 2021, alongside what happened in 2019 when it first aired, and some of the things that I would like to see, what you might see based on some of the new advertising for it, and just a few other details. And of course, if this does help you decide on whether or not you'd like to go this year, or you just enjoy this sort of content, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. And let's get into what happened in 2019. Of course, it was cancelled in 2020 due to restrictions and social distancing, but of course, we're thinking that it might follow some of the similar themes with the scare mazes as it did in 2019, and they have announced that there will be a ride included in the experience, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you do start in a military decontamination unit, which is on the lot where the Trauma Towers attraction used to be, and you were sprayed with water and told about the portals that are letting creatures in from hell. So of course this was actually a very immersive experience, as people did actually mention, and of course it's all about these portals that have opened up in the Pleasure Beach, and all these monsters have basically come out, and you're going around trying to, find them and not necessarily get rid of them, because of course it obviously backfires. So guests are then told to lay down on the path, and after a speech from the mayor of this fictional town, the creatures are then battled, fought and killed. You were then chased by a buggy around the park up to the first maze, which is the Clown Maze, and this is an outdoor maze on the Chinese puzzle maze area, which is underneath Revolution, and it's obviously filled with smoke, actors including the clown, which people have said is the most memorable part of it. Of course, I didn't actually attend this event, and of course places did book up very quickly, suggesting that it was the first horror sort of attraction that the park had done other than Passage del Terror. So it was very popular, and there was obviously the sort of scarecrow type character, but some people said it was very lacking with things like utilising areas of darkness where there could have been a shadow where a character could have been hiding, but there just never was, and the tension felt very misplaced rather than actually purposeful. So then you did actually enter an underground lair, which is the sort of underground tunnels of the Pleasure Beach, which have been abandoned for many years because those areas of the park don't need to be accessed from beneath the ground anymore. And then you were chased by a crazy group and creatures which are wearing masks made out of like skin and bits of random dead things. So of course that was the main staple area because people had never seen this area of the park before. Of course the rest of the mazes took place on areas which you could clearly see, and all the mazes were in clear daylight apart from this one. So of course that made it very attractive, but once again the shadows were very poorly utilised with things like that. But I do hope that they do actually bring this back, and I'll talk about what I'd like them to do with it if they did bring it back for this year. So you then watch a bit about a scientist creature test, and I believe that I'm not too sure where this was actually placed, but you did watch a little bit of a thing, and then the lights all dimmed down, and you were told to brace on your seat, and then creatures touch your back and your legs. Of course, none's really mentioned what was actually touching your arms and your legs and things like that, because really, I don't think anyone was planning on opening their eyes, and it might have just been a bunch of people in polo shirts and trousers, but we just don't know about that. So then you were kidnapped by plague doctors, which, the advertisement for the plague doctor, that was what made me want to actually go to do it, because, I really do like history with the plague and the Black Death, but unfortunately that was the only time that they appeared. Of course, you were put with like little sacks around your head, you were guided into the icon queue, and then of course you were given a blindfold after the bags were removed, so then you could safely get onto the ride, and then you rode it blindfolded. Of course this must have been incredible, because of course the ride would have been running for all of the park opening hours, so it would have had a really great smooth ride. It'd been really fast because all of the bearings would have been greased, and it would have had some pretty good rides, and it wouldn't be rusty from any sort of wear or anything, or just starting up. So that must have been really cool and intense. So then in the park, there are actors that do lurk in the shadows still, which seems like a really great addition as well, because, not every single, guided horror maze will have, scare actors in the transition zones, but I really do like the fact that they did actually utilise some shadows in the park. And, I really do hope that for this year they do actually bring scare actors, hiding in different places around the park rather than just being oh, we're safe now, we're going to walk to the next scare maze. I really do like how that continuation happens and how it feels like there are these monsters that are actually plaguing the park instead of, oh, they're just in these hot spots and we're going to take you to them. So guests are then guided into Passage del Terra for a full walk through the attraction, and then afterwards the victims of the night can go into the horror bar for a drink. Of course, I'll get into who's allowed into the horror bar because there are some licensing issues of who's allowed in and who isn't, but of course everyone can go in Passage del Terra, and that is the main staple really of the attraction, is that walkthrough, because Passage del Terra is world renowned for its incredible acting. It's got some very detailed sets inside, and it's just a really great area. It's got a lovely facade, and during the day you do also see some scare actors outside that try to lure you in, and that's a really great addition to the experience before you even go in. But obviously before you do go into Passage del Terra, there is a sort of risque maze section, which isn't exactly risque. They did obviously put out a warning for sort of mature content in relation to that, but it wasn't exactly anything too mature that any teenagers under the age of 15 would really be worried about. So for the requirements for entry to the actual attraction as a whole, you would need to arrive before your time at the ticket centre, which is below the casino building, with booking evidence and also your ID. You must then consent to a bag check and a full pat-down for security reasons. Of course, if you say, I'm not comfortable with that, then you won't be allowed in the attraction. Of course, that's just because, there's a lot of weapons involved in it and you don't want anyone coming in with those weapons shown. So you must not also participate in fancy dress or mask wearing, apart from, face coverings due to some of the current, issues that are going on. You don't want to get the virus during a Horror Nights attraction. If you are under 14, you must not enter the horror bar. Instead, the Horseshoe Bar, which is once again in the casino building, just because of licensing issues. And, they do really only sell, alcoholic beverages in there. So that's just a little thing there. And if you are under 15, you must also have a guardian who can consent to you viewing the content. That's more for, the maze that happens before Passage del Terra, and of course some of the more violent aspects of it. And you must be well enough to ride Icon and also to be able to run, because of course you do have the buggy chase bit, and you are chased through quite a bit of the attraction. In particular in Passage del Terra at the end you're chased out of the attraction. So you definitely need to be well enough to be able to run and also ride a ride and be able to brace on said ride in case of any operational issues. So if you were age 13 and over, then you can actually do the Horror Nights attraction, and there should not be more than a 6-to-1 ratio of minors to adults. So of course if there are 7 under 16s and there is no adult, you won't be allowed in the attraction. You need to bring one guardian who can consent, which I believe for the attraction is actually 15 and up instead of 16 and up, but I'll have to look into that, or you can on the website. So for booking your visit, you need to go onto the Blackpool Pleasure Beach website and search Journey to Hell Freak Nights, and of course it'll come up with all your FAQs and, your requirements and rules, and then also the booking areas. So you can then book from the many time slots available, and they take place every half an hour. So there isn't more days necessarily than it was in 2019, because the one in 2019 ran from the 2nd of October to the 2nd of November. But there are time slots from, obviously the 8th of October, and those times end on the 31st of October. And they happen just about every day. Some of them are every other day, but, they're a bit, irregulated. And of course the times do range from 7pm to 9:30pm, on most nights of course exceeding those that start at 8pm or end at 8:30pm starting at 7pm. So here's just a quick disclaimer: there will be no other rides on the Freak Nights that are open other than the one that is part of the Horror Night experience. It's suspected that it's going to be Icon again because of the popularity of, the ride being there and how you were blindfolded. I'm assuming it will be that again, but I'm not too sure about that. They haven't announced very many details. But don't expect to be going on any other rides because, the Horror Nights, Freak Nights do take place after park closure hours. So, of course, if you are coming in as a family for the Vampire Beach, there is no issue with there being scare actors there during your visit. So for the things that I would like to see happen in the Journey to Hell Freak Nights for this year, I would like a storyline that links to the family event at the park. Of course, it's not like family, it's just like creepy decorations with a few walk around actors. And that's of course named Vampire Pleasure Beach, which could be coming based on the poster, because as you can see here, that's definitely a vampire. The previous poster displayed a sort of possessed girl with sharp, jagged teeth. But this definitely is a vampire, and I'm hoping that we do get a vampire-themed maze, because, it'd tie in really nice to have a storyline based on what goes on at the park at the time, because although it was a really nice storyline that they made for the last one, I would really like an exploration or some origins of how these monsters came into the park for the Vampire Beach. And of course, I could use the same excuse of portals, but I would really like them to explore things with the werewolf and the vampires and the zombies. So I'd like the underground maze to return for definite, but seizing more of the opportunities with the dark spots of the tunnels. That also maybe includes, upping the age from 13 plus to maybe 16 plus or even 18 plus, because, it could be so much more intense than it is already. And, it's very tame, just so then all people who are 13 can, feel it's acceptable to go into. But they could really make things very good there, because Blackpool during, October and November is incredibly dark from like 5 p.m. onwards. So they could definitely make sure they use the shadows, because there are a lot of them in the park. So I would also want a maze that focuses on the Black Death in Lancashire, which of course did wipe out many towns, and, to have some gory interactions with guests, because there were some absolutely horrific attempts at curing the Black Death and getting rid of buboes in Lancashire, and there were records of it. And of course you do always have not the Alton Towers, the Blackpool Tower dungeons, where you can see the Plague Doctor there, but I would really like if they did more with the Plague Doctors rather than it just being for the icon interaction. And it'd be really nice if they did something linked to the history and linked to, the one in 2019, and do some things to do with that. I think that'd be a really nice element. I would also want them to have some link to the werewolf in the park, as I've mentioned, and, that could be including the scientists. Like, it was a really bad science experiment. It doesn't have to be, like a stereotypical werewolf where it's a boy who turns into a wolf at the rise of the moon. It could be something that's different, and then that makes the experience a lot more interactive. And then when you're walking around the park in the following days or the preceding days, your whole perception changes, and it feels like it's flowing through the park, and it's not just something that happens on a night where all these monsters come out on a night. It's something that's constantly happening. I'd really want it to, flow a lot more than it did on 2019. So I would also want some form of zombies. I'm not too sure why. I just feel like you can do so much with them crawling out and staggering and grabbing people, or, they're just something that's a staple of Halloween, and I feel like they could do something with them, and I'm not too sure what. So I'd also want Icon to return with a blindfold. Passage del Terror should return as well. Of course, it's not a horror attraction without the staple horror attraction at the park. And also the horror bar, I think that should return. It was beautifully themed and dressed up for the event, and it always is anyway. And, some people might just need a quick drink after they've been around if it's meant to be better than it was in 2019. And also, forget the risque content. It's not worth it. There's nothing really scary you can do with, women in bikinis. It's not scary or anything. I'd maybe just switch that out for a properly scary maze before you went to Passage del Terror, or something that builds up to it, because it just seemed a bit out of place. And also more merchandise than prior, because, a lot of it was, like the steampunk hats and goggles, and, you had the hoodie, but I would like to see some more merchandise for it, particularly themed on the separate mazes, and you can pick favourites, because it was more colloquial merchandise for the Horror Nights, and maybe some more for the Vampire Beach as well. So is it actually worth a trip to go to the Freak Nights this year, and in general in the future? I would say this year that the park does actually promise it will be bigger and better, and hopefully more organised than it was in 2019. Of course, some groups did get different experiences to others. Not all the groups were organised very well. Some people in small parties were split up, and not everything was working too well. But I really do hope they redeemed themselves and it was just teething issues, and it is actually a lot scarier and a lot better than it was last year. Of course, it will not last year, 2019, but they haven't actually changed the age restrictions. It's still 13 and over. But I'm hoping that definition of 13 and over and having to consent to the content, I hope that has a bit more of a defined line where it's like, there is something that is very scary in here, there is something to do with blood, there is something to do with gore, because it's all like mature content, intense, violence, risque content, it was all very colloquial, and it wasn't like, oh my god, there is something really bad in here that not all 13-year-olds can handle. They're really lowering the bar by having it, such a low age rate, when they can do so much more, and I know they can because of how detailed, Vampire Beach is, with the makeup and all the, scenery. They can higher the standards so much more. And the actors, as always, were incredibly dedicated to the role, and it's always worth supporting the scare actors because, not all of them do work at the park for the rest of the year. Some of them come in just for Halloween. So, of course, it's always nice to support people who are incredibly dedicated to the craft, very good at it. And, for some of the people who play zombies and different monsters, it mustn't be nice for the vocal cords to be strained like that. And it's always nice if they bring some characters back to see what new people do with the role if they've recast. And, just see how it changes. I would always be interested in going to see something new with it. So they are actually yet to advertise it as the most intense experience available, just scarier than it was before, and that's the key. They're trying to advertise it that it's better, it's scarier, it's more intense than it was before, and of course some people didn't believe it was intense, and just making it more intense, means that it's definitely going to be something better than it was last year. They've really put some thought into it. And to say they're only advertising it, back end of August, that's a good sign that they're not trying to over-advertise it. And when I was in the park, there was no hints at, the Freak Nights for this year. There was hardly any mention of it. There was really no confirmation apart from some of the dates being available based on, just in general. It really does make me think that they are trying to make it scarier than it was. So even though it did have a rough start, there has always been teething issues with any Horror Nights, and there's always been disappointments with scare mazes not living up to the expectations. Of course, with things like Universal, and I know this isn't a great example because Universal is like a AAA branded theme park with all sorts of licensing for different films, but there's always going to be a disappointment when you have a franchise that you really want to, have a scare maze for, whether it's American Horror Story, Stranger Things, Ghostbusters. There's always a chance you're going to get disappointed with it, and you always have to realise that there might be teething issues on the first few days or the first few years of this operating, but I'm really hoping that they've studied over the past 2 years and that they've really got to grips with how Horror Nights work, and, got the organisation right, because, 2 years to plan one event that lasts for a month is a pretty long time, and I'm hoping that they've really used that to think things through, as a Pleasure Beach always does. So if you can actually afford it, I would recommend going to another horror night at a different theme park so you don't miss out on that. If you think, oh, this might not be great at the Pleasure Beach, and, I do want to go to Alton Towers, but I want to check out the one at the Pleasure Beach to see if it's actually better than it was in 2019. If you can afford it, of course, I would make sure to get down and do this and maybe do Alton Towers, Scarefest, or, do it at Fort Park. Of course, if you can afford it, it's always worth going to too, so then you don't feel like you've missed out on anything. So you can actually go to the park before the Freak Nights is on, and you can check out the decor and the maze facades. Of course, that's mainly during when the event's on that you can see that, but there might just be 1 or 2 spare places left. Of course, they are saying, book now so you don't miss out, so if you don't want to go, I'd book now, but there might be 1 or 2 places left over if you're lucky, and you can look at some of the things that are on offer, or just wait till some more announcements come and just risk it, and see if there's anything that you're interested in. Also, I'd recommend lowering your expectations. The lower they are, the less you're going to be disappointed and the more impressed you're going to be, because you thought it's going to be like 2019 where people were disappointed and, only the faint of heart were truly scared, or maybe people who weren't so versed in horror and jump scares and didn't enjoy that sort of thing, they got a fright out of it. If you just went in like that and thought, oh, it's not going to be the best, if you're that sort of person, when you go in and you get scared at anything, you'd be like, oh, that actually genuinely scared me. I thought it wouldn't, and I thought this maze wasn't going to be scary whatsoever. It's not going to be Alton Towers standard or Fort Park, because they've done it for years now, and it's obviously advanced and evolved, and they've had mazes which have come and gone and not been great and changed and, they've gone from being great to being updated to then not being great and then being removed. There's always going to be changes in teething issues, and you've got to make sure that your expectations are moderate. It's not going to be universal happening at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but I'm sure they're really going to raise the bar, and it's going to be incredible this year. People are so hyped for it, and it's meant to be very scary this year, and I'm really hoping they do mean that, because, the Vampire Beach has always been a legendary thing for me. I've always enjoyed going and looking at all the decorations, and, it'd be nice if they had something else to add that element of depth with the Freak Nights to it. And yeah, this is really it for this video. It has been longer than I actually expected, but I really am passionate about the park developing its Halloween side of things, because I've always loved Halloween at the park. My birthday is, around the Halloween time, and, I just really love going to the park around that point. The decorations are incredible, the actors are always on point, and I really do hope they step up the game this year and don't disappoint anyone. And I'm thinking that they are going to raise up to my expectations, and they're really going to redeem themselves. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. And yeah, this is Just Talking. Bye bye.